Thanks, Madam President. I move the motion standing in my name.
Members, the Honourable Colin de Grussa has moved that this House A recognises the lengthy timeline for implementation of the McGowan Government's machinery of government MOG changes. B, notes the effect of the MOG changes on the Department of Primary Industries and Regional Development DPIRD. And C, calls on the Premier and the Minister for Regional Development to immediately take action to stem job losses and mental health concerns within DPIRD. The question is that motion be agreed. The Honourable Colin de Grussa.
Thanks, Madam President. So I bring this important motion for discussion today because the machinery of government changes implemented by the McGowan Government are a seismic change in the structure and function of government departments on a very large scale, and obviously that is going to have a very big effect on the people within those departments and on their ability to deliver the remit of government. Change is difficult in any circumstance. A change of this scale is even more difficult, and especially when we're looking at organisational change where we're amalgamating a number of different departments. There are a whole raft of things that need to be considered and adopted in making those changes. And ensuring that staff uncertainty and fears and concerns are dealt with along the way, and that the change actually delivers what it intends to deliver. And that requires strong management. And so what is the consideration this government gave to how the change would be managed, and how the consideration of all those other things would be allowed for? One of the, in the course of the research here, the Victorian Public Sector Commission had published a document which I came across talking about leadership errors commonly made during organisational change, specifically relating to the public sector. And I'll list those 8 common errors made. So one of those is focusing on content but not on the process and the people, overlooking accountabilities, mistaking communication for consultation, creating change plans that themselves do not change, not planning for a drop in organisational productivity, forgetting to revise formal delegations, not doing what you expect others to do, that is change, and withdrawing focus too soon. The interesting one of those points there regarding the planning for a drop in organisational productivity, this is really important because what you've got here is a department going through a seismic change. At the same time, a new government elected considers itself to have a strong mandate to implement its policy and legislative reforms, so really wants an increase in productivity at the same time in managing this significant change, which actually would more than likely result in it being very difficult for the people in those departments to actually deliver that productivity required. But what's even more important is when the change is unplanned. Now, back in the 28th of April 2017, Stuart McKinnon and Dylan Caporn wrote an article in the West Australian, McGowan flags imminent public service cuts. And in this article they say, Mr McGowan said the government had committed to public sector reform before the election. In a speech in December, he said a Labor government would aim to reduce the number of agencies by 20%. So this is in December of 2016. And in December of 2016, we have the WA Labor public sector policy. And interestingly, the second paragraph of this policy says the following: we recognise the need to respond to the changes in the WA economy and population by recruiting, retaining and supporting our public sector employees. So at the same time, the Premier-to-be, or aspiring Premier, in December 2016 was announcing a 20% cut in the number of agencies. The Labor public sector policy actually talks about recruiting, retaining and supporting public sector employees. Incredibly important, and of course subsequent, in fact on the same day that that article appeared in the West Australian, a media release from the Premier then stated that they've announced a 40% of government departments to be amalgamated and abolished. So it was 20%, then it went up to 40%, so they've certainly surpassed their pre-election commitment and well and truly surpassed the policy of actually retaining and attracting and recruiting people to the public sector. So all of this change and these announcements of change create a great deal of uncertainty. Of course, subsequent to those announcements, the government goes on to announce a service priority review. And that service priority review was meant to set out the blueprint for reform and cultural change in Western Australia's public sector. So that report was delivered in October 2017. So that's 6 months after the announcement and in fact 10 months after the announcement if you go back to December that there was going to be significant change. Now, fast forward to 2018, 28th of November 2018, an article in the West Australian again by Paul Murray, Cogs of Change Turning Slowly in Government. So Mr Murray in this article refers to, and in fact he says here, nearly 18 months into the process, the Auditor-General is unimpressed with how the program is performing. Progress with amalgamating the various systems of the constituent entities is slow, with most departments continuing to operate on several financial, human resource and administrative systems. This report, released on November the 8th, 2018, says. So this is the Auditor-General's report, Annual 2017-18 Financial Audit of State Government Entities. So that report released in November of 2018 again says that implementation is taking longer than expected and indeed having problems amalgamating a number of the systems. Fast forward to June this year, to the hearings, estimates hearings held this year here for the Department of Primary Industries and Regional Development. In her opening statement, the Minister says, "We recognise that the Department of Primary Industries and Regional Development is still going through its machinery of government phase and that this does present some challenges." So we've gone through 17, 18, halfway through 2019, still got the uncertainty created by these changes, putting a tremendous amount of pressure on the employees of the department. No doubt change of that scale does take time to implement. However, it's also very interesting to go back to 2017 and yet another article in the West Australian by Dylan Capehorn on the 25th of July 2017, Government Cuts Causing Stress in WA Public Servants. So Mr Capehorn refers to a poll of public sector workers showing more than 60% had found out about downsizing from colleagues rather than managers. Now this is very interesting. It's research done by Stephen Teo, Professor at Edith Cowan University. And I reached out to Stephen Teo, to Professor Teo, in the course of researching for this motion, and he was in the US presenting over there, but he came back to me very graciously in an email, and I'm very grateful for his response, outlining some of the results that he'd found in the survey that he'd done of these public sector employees. And so to summarise a few of those key points that he makes, things like this: people don't know how to plan for their lives or make vital decisions because of the stress and pressure that's being put on them through these changes. 57% of respondents to his survey reported some degree of stress, 65% reported feeling tired for no good reason, 60% feeling nervous at work. As employees experienced frequent and uncertain change, there was an increase in insomnia and psychological distress, which in turn was leading to depression. So all of these things are going on. This is 2017 that this work was done, published in the news in the West Australian in July 2017, 25th July 2017. And now let's fast forward to 2019 again. And just last week, a survey from the CPSU into DPIRD. Very interesting that these issues foreshadowed in 2017. What do the survey results tell us from 2019? I understand this survey occurred in around May this year. 71% of respondents to the survey had no confidence in job security within the Department of Primary Industries and Regional Development. No confidence in job security. 69% of respondents felt that organisational change was having a negative impact on their mental health. One survey respondent commented that DPIRD has become a dysfunctional and unhappy workplace. It is only through the goodwill of the people that the organisation continues to deliver, but this comes at a cost to morale and to the health of individuals. So we've got this clear data from this survey done by the CPSU that there are a bunch of problems within the department. We've got this survey done in 2017 by Stephen Teo across the public sector that also indicated issues occurring. So it's pretty reasonable to say that the problems that identified in this CPSU report should have been foreseen and managed, and systems and processes should have been put in place to identify these issues and deal with them immediately. What is also very interesting in this survey is that if we look at a question asked, are you clear about your ongoing role within the agency? Of the respondents to that question, 3.6% said they were very clear about their ongoing role within the agency. 96% were not clear. A little bit clear or not at all clear. 96% of people who responded to that survey within the Department of Primary Industries and Regional Development are struggling to know what their ongoing role is within that agency. That is incredibly challenging for the people in the organisation to actually, if they don't know what they're supposed to be doing, how are they able to do it? How is productivity able to be improved? How is their health and well-being supposed to be managed? And of course, how are the functions of the agency able to be carried out in a timely and effective manner, and especially when you layer on top of that the government and ministers' priorities in terms of policy and legislation as well. That creates a pretty big sandwich for these employees to find themselves in, and leaves them in a very difficult situation as to how they may actually manage their way through all of this. So again, what we've got here is this massive change and uncertainty created by these machinery of government changes. We've forgotten, I believe the government has certainly forgotten, that government isn't a machine, it is people. The public sector are very good people doing a very good job of implementing the work of government, and also ensuring, most people working in the public sector would say they are doing something for the people of Western Australia. And I think it's incredibly important that we support them through that, and that when changes like this are occurring, we ensure that systems and processes are put in place so that their health and wellbeing all the way along is monitored and maintained, and so that we know that we can effectively identify when there are problems occurring. So it is interesting that this survey came out very recently and identified, as I've said, a number of significant issues, very significant issues within the department and within the health and wellbeing of the people within the department who are working hard to carry out the roles and functions within the department, even though 96% of them are uncertain about what their role is. Now, if we go forward to talk about a bit more about the roles within the department, I've asked a number of questions over the course of this parliament in terms of what the roles and functions of people within the Department of Primary Industries and Regional Development is. If we look here, for example, at a question taken on notice from the hearing, this year's budget estimates hearing, I asked a question about providing a split of the FTE across agriculture, fisheries and regional development. The response came back to that. It is not possible for the Department of Primary Industries and Regional Development to provide a split of its current FTE between the subject matters of the previous legacy agencies. The restructure of DPIRD's functions and positions to implement the machinery of government changes has resulted in the realignment of functions and, in some cases, movement of staff from specific roles held in the legacy agencies into broader roles to support DPIRD's broader remit. While many staff members continue to provide expertise in one or other area, identification of these staff members would be a significant task and would not provide a meaningful split of FTE overall. So we can't get that information. In a question prior to the hearing, the answer to which was provided immediately ahead of the hearing. This is very helpful information that the Minister provided. I've got no issue with this. The response here is very helpful, very useful document, tomes of information here. And I asked specifically about the breakdown of FTE by region, town and position right across Western Australia for DPIRD. Over a course of a number of different years. And very helpfully, there is a table here which lists the whatever it is, 1,500 and 1,663 FTE, I think it is, across the department in the various locations where they have offices. And so these very helpfully, this information provides a position title for a number of these offices. Yet we're clearly told that we can't say whether the staff members provide expertise in one area or another, because their functions are split across a number of the different, or their roles are split across a number of the different functions within the department. The CPSU survey identifies this very clearly, that people don't know what role they're... are you clear about the ongoing role within the agency? They're not clear about their role within the agency. And so I wonder, I mean, if we look at some of the examples of FTE across the department here, I mean, is a senior fisheries and marine officer providing services to agriculture or regional development or fisheries, or is biosecurity? What remit is that? Is that an agricultural remit or a fisheries remit? It could be argued that can be spread across fisheries and agriculture, possibly not regional development. Again, quarantine inspectors. I mean, all of these things, these various roles, these various functions, it shouldn't be that difficult, given this information is in a very convenient spreadsheet, to actually establish at least what the baseline number of people providing services under agriculture, fisheries or regional development is, to provide clarity to those people at the very least that the title of their job actually does mean something, and give them some clarity as to what their role is within the department. And that is clearly identified as a significant problem in the CPSU survey. This uncertainty, identified by Professor Teo way back in 2017, also identifies these uncertainty issues. I've talked about change and how that creates uncertainty, and that uncertainty must be managed because government is not a machine, it is people, and those people absolutely deserve to be treated fairly, to have clarity as to what their role is, and to know that they are valued and important to the government and the people of Western Australia. It must be very challenging for them currently in their roles within this department in particular, but also within their role across other departments. So the last part of this motion itself is quite self-explanatory. We in the National Party here are asking for support of other members in the chamber here to call immediately on the Premier and Minister for Regional Development to take action to address the concerns around mental health and job losses within DPIRD. Now, we've clearly identified a number of warning signs that were out in 2017, that there could well be significant health and wellbeing problems within a broad number of government departments, obviously including DPIRD. The CPSU surveys come out subsequently and clearly identified very significant issues. Why haven't the warnings early on been heeded? Why has it taken until now for something to be done? The management of this change, the managers of this change must be held responsible for ensuring that they check in with the people for whom the change is being made and understand that their health and wellbeing is incredibly important to ensure that productivity of the organisation continues to be strong, to ensure that organisation can deliver not only on the government's commitments in terms of policy and legislation, but also to continue to perform the essential functions that they do for the industries they represent. Regional development, an incredibly important function. Agriculture, an incredibly important function, obviously a very significant industry in Western Australia. Fisheries, a very significant industry as well. And the people working in those organisations, as well as industry at large, need certainty that the staff are functioning at the best they can be, and that they are in turn being looked after so they can perform the functions that the industry requires of them. And so we are calling on the Premier and the Minister for Regional Development to take action immediately and to explain to us in the Parliament here how they are going to address the concerns that we've raised throughout this motion.